What's up, everyone? Normal Christians Podcast. My name is Bo. As always, I reserve the right to get smarter. And on this episode, man, we're doing something a little different. Something I've actually always wanted to do, and was part of the reason I even wanted to do a podcast, was to talk to people. And, I mean, this podcast, all 5 of you who are listening, I appreciate it. You know, it's not sort of big enough to get, I don't know. Some of these podcasts are interviewing like senators or people, but that's not what I want. I just want to talk to normal people, normal Christians, right? That's the name of the podcast. And today we've got a normal one. I guess that's a terrible way to introduce anybody. How awesome do you feel with me introducing you that way, right?
I feel pretty normal right now.
Yeah, good. Definitely nothing special. Everyone make sure you keep that in mind. That's not how this works. But anyway, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you and what are you doing here?
Yeah, so hello. My name is Elijah Gaiter. I'm a pretty normal guy. I work a job. I participate in my church. It's great.
Wow, all right.
Yeah, what a great introduction. No, so I work in tech, which is pretty fun. I argue with computers every day. Let me tell you, it's great. I tell them what to do, and then they do the opposite.
Does that mean you're not good at your job?
We like to say it in a different way.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I don't know if you were arguing as if we finally have AI sort of, what was that movie with Will Smith?
You thinking of iRobot?
iRobot, like we had iRobot going here and you're arguing with them or something of that nature.
Yeah, I'm more like the person who built that computer thinking it would do a good thing and then it did a bad thing.
So when it all goes down, when Skynet comes up.
Oh, it'll be somebody like me that did it wrong, for sure.
Well, it's all right. I'll be one of the first to die. I don't even know what the situation is, but
it's okay. I'll join you there. It'll be fun.
Fair enough. Okay, so you work in tech. So, and you said you do stuff at your church. What do you do at the church?
It's mostly volunteer, also with tech. So, my church is a portable church, so we have to set up and tear everything down every single week, which is a little bit of work.
Yeah.
But so I help out with that, and then I also help run the actual computers. So. Some days I'm literally just the person pushing the button so that the slides change. And then other days we're doing really complicated stuff and I'm making all sorts of different pieces play together nice.
I'm sure they gave you a cool title though, besides, like, it's not, the title isn't button pusher, I'd imagine.
No, it's actually volunteer. It's even better.
It's just volunteer?
It's just, I don't have a title. What are you talking about?
I mean, the position, no. I'm sure.
But Bo, if I had a title, would I be normal anymore? Wouldn't that make me special?
It depends on the title.
I'll see if I can get them to give me like normal tech guy as a title.
Normal tech guy. I mean, go with superior or something. I don't know, but okay.
I don't want that. They'd probably give me some extra responsibilities.
That's fair, because you know when things go wrong in the church, and if anybody's listening's ever worked or been at a church for a while, you know when things go wrong, they're blaming the tech people more often than not.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I bet you don't. You know, the slide doesn't fire, the lights don't come on, there's some sort of break. Yeah, I actually, at a mega church, I did some production aspect too. So, yeah, we got blamed for a lot of stuff. Luckily, it wasn't really my job, so...
Yeah, somebody's actually getting paid to do that, and then they have to fix it.
Yeah, so you do it wrong, they get fussed or yelled at, and then they have to come back to you. And
the more we talk about this, the more I think this is a pretty good deal.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, you know, you're not the one who gets the brunt of it, and you just get to apparently push the button.
I get to push the button.
Nice. And I'm joking around, but that is actually a pretty important part of having done production at any sort of...
There's a surprising amount of depth to it as well. Like it's, especially like, you know, let's say you're in a worship service where they have the words up on the screen. If the words come up too late, you have new people who don't know whatever song you're singing. You have no idea what you're doing. And if they come up to you early, you're like, well, this is kind of awkward.
Can I say, though, I actually have a problem with when the words come up too late, in the sense that it should never happen. It bothers me. It's actually one of my pet peeves in production, because I would much rather it fire too early. Because people have already pretty much know the line, or depending on where they fire it. And but when you do it too late, like, I don't know, now I can't worship. Now all of a sudden I won't accept Jesus, and I'm pretty much a heathen.
Yeah, you're pretty much dead.
Yeah. all because you pushed the button too late.
Yeah, this is why I have to pay attention. Big old cup of coffee every week.
And eternity hangs in the balance on the button pushing. Come on, man.
Sometimes it really feels that way.
All right, Elijah, what are we talking about, man? Besides, obviously the eternity of button pushing here.
Yeah, so I was thinking it would be pretty fun to talk on a kind of a similar track about technology in the church, what we do with it, how we use it, what do we do that's good, what do we do that's maybe not good, and then maybe even dip a little bit into kind of the history of some of how the church has related to technology in different areas of technology.
Wow. Okay. I like it. So where are we going? Start us off, man.
Yeah, I mean, well, I got to pick a place to start now.
Yeah. I mean,
It's so difficult.
What you wanted to talk about was like all of human history and technology and then apply it to the church.
Surely this is a one episode topic.
Is it though?
What if we do just the Cliff Notes version of it?
Fair enough. But that's why I'm putting it on you to start.
Yeah, right. So what I do with work. So we'll kind of start with what the church does with technology today, some of the places that it's good and lets us do things, and maybe some of the places where it can cause challenges.
Deal.
So, for example, in my church, we're a younger church, and we have a lot of really nice equipment, lots of new tech, and some of the things we do make it look more low-tech, partially because we want it to be perhaps more accessible to people, so it feels like they're not walking into this strange space that's just like, wow, everything's so fancy. Do I really belong here?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
But like we have a lot of tech, and most time I think we use it really well. But one of the traps that I've seen some challenges with at my church, and I know some other churches can kind of definitely struggle with, is when you get so focused on doing everything right with the technology that you kind of lose track of the reason why you started with the technology in the first place. Like, so in our case, we have a projector and a screen and the computers that put the words on the screen. And we use that so when we're doing worship, if people don't know the song, it makes it easy for them to follow along.
Yeah, sure.
And that's amazing. It really helps people. I remember the first time I walked into a church where they had that instead of having to hold a book. It's like, this is great.
Yeah, I could see that. It's a lot easier to see it on a big screen and have the line pop up than having to thumb through a book or figure that out. Which, as I say that's what my church does. So
don't get me wrong. I still do love. There's something special, especially when it's just all a cappella.
Yeah,
there's something special about doing a cappella worship with a hymnal in your hands. There is definitely something to that. I have no musical talent and have never developed any musical skill.
Preach it.
Yeah, so I can't sing. You don't ever want to hear me sing. So the hymnals are like distracting for me though, because I'm a detail guy. So you've got all the notes, you've got the sheet music here to go with it for people who know how to sing.
Yeah, it's true.
And so it's almost a distraction for me because I'm like trying to figure out, okay, how does this work with what I'm hearing? And maybe I can do it, but of course I can't because I'm terrible.
Can you even read sheet music, or you're just?
If I were to spend like a week actually remembering like where like middle C is on the sheet, then yes, like I know all the keys and I understand like most of the concepts, but I need to review everything.
Yeah.
So
I don't know
I'm
why.
like 60% of the way there.
I was going to say, I don't even know why I asked, because I can't. And you said middle C, and I was just like, all right, that's fair. That's already more than I know. But anyway, yeah, continue. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no. So we use a lot of technology. Most of it's around what we present and being able to try and enhance that presentation. But definitely one of the biggest traps that I've seen a handful of times at my church, and I've definitely seen at other churches, is where we get so focused on the technology and doing everything right that it ends up damaging some of the relationships and the people side of what we're doing. Jokingly earlier, we were talking about how there's blowback that comes back on people when the lights are late or a slide doesn't go on screen. And those are the kinds of things where I think we have a hard time figuring out where is the line in the sand between wanting to do, take whatever we're doing and do the best we can. If we're going to do something, do it to the glory of God. That doesn't mean do a do a really terrible job and not actually care at all about the quality of what you're putting out into the world. But then so we're doing that. We want to do it well. But then what's the price we're willing to pay, especially when it comes to people, to do it right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I've been a part of a lot of churches, and production, at least in some aspects, important. I mean, you got to have some sort of order to the service, and you know, as technology, I don't know, as tech has been more and more implemented in the church, you not only have to have order, but you have to have you know, a little vision behind what you're doing, and skill. My buddy at a church, he was first time running the smoke machine. I mean, they had to open the doors. He was jamming the smoke machine button a little bit too much. If you had just came into church that Sunday, you thought, well, in Colorado, you'd have thought, oh, okay.
Oh, it's a wildfire day.
Or everybody's taking part of that Colorado product, you know what I'm saying? And they'll need the smoke machine. Anyway, that's spiraling a bit. But yeah, no, certainly, I mean, tech seems important, at least to a point, but where do you think that point goes from it being productive to maybe even harmful is not the right word, but not as productive, or maybe even an issue, especially when you start talking about people, because I've seen this before, where it can almost become production over people, and I don't think anybody shoots for that, hopefully not, but it happens. I mean, I could give examples. I feel like I could give a lot of examples of that happening, but when do you think that point is, especially since you're doing that right now in the church?
Yeah, so I think oftentimes that line is typically very closely related to the reasons why you're doing certain things. So one of the examples we gave is when something is wrong, there's typically, you know, some sort of feedback that happens around that. And inherently, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's the nature of the feedback. What are we supposed to do about it? You know, how did you communicate with the people who need to make a change? You know, a good example at a huge number of churches, the person who's actually changing the slides you're seeing on the screen is a volunteer, almost always.
Yeah.
So how hard are you able to lean on that person? Because everything they're doing for you is donated time.
Sure. Yeah.
And especially if you've never actually like done a proper workshop or anything to train these people, how much can you reasonably expect of them without communicating, okay, here's change. We are changing the expectations. Here's what we want. How does that sound to you? Whereas instead it's like, well, the slides were a little off this week. Do you think you could do better next week? And then, you know, 3 weeks later, they're still having a struggle because, well, they haven't received any training. Nothing's really changed. And the tone can start to change.
Yeah. 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 That, I think that's fair. I think, yeah, as we're talking about the tech part, I don't know, not only in volunteering, which certainly is important. Again, I did production at a really big church, and it wasn't even my job. I don't know how I got into it, and that was their mistake. But there was, I mean, it's almost all run by volunteers. Usually tech people, I mean, there's probably a tech guy at a church or a girl, but they're usually not a bunch of them. And so you're really relying on it. And I don't know. I mean, maybe you got an opinion on this, even not just in the church setting, because probably most people listening aren't going to be able to understand or relate to specifically volunteering in a tech role. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have in most situations. But I think in general, tech is good and can be good for Christians, but the lines start getting blurry. And I think they start getting blurry, obviously, like you were just talking about, a church setting where, look, you value production, you want it to be good, do it all for the glory of God. Look, if you do it right, that whole sort of thing. So when the right screen isn't firing or the music doesn't play right, well, this gets into other tech, but you don't have the sound or whatever it is, the bumper, the transition isn't quite right, background lights, depending on how big of the church is, all these sort of things. You want it to be right, but it starts getting like, okay, man, they're just volunteers running this. These are people giving their time, giving their best effort. And so in one sense, you want to go, all right, look, we're doing it. We're doing this for the glory of God, and these people are certainly not doing this wrong on purpose. But also, on the other hand, like, look, how can we improve? How can we make this better? But that's where that line comes for me. And I know I was even talking to a buddy today. We talked for about an hour and a half where he's been burned out on church pretty much almost completely. And it just dealt with this whole idea, and it wasn't just production, but it's not having people on the forefront, not having them. It's just all these other things besides the people, but besides the discipleship, because that's another part of the tech sort of thing too. Is the tech people can get isolated and outside of community. I know that there was a back room where most of our tech people were at, but even as you start going into how does this relate to other normal people who don't necessarily volunteer at church, tech in the church is getting more and more, so it's getting more and more of a production. It's getting more and more certainly consumeristic, but even as church is moving into people's pockets in different ways like that, it starts becoming weird. Like the lines aren't clear on, well, tech's here, and it's great. Let's use it. I mean, I use it even in my church is far from tech savvy. If anybody's been, you know what I'm talking about. But I mean, I certainly throw up slides. I throw up the verses. It just makes things go better than people flipping pages, let's say, to get to the scripture, all those sort of stuff. But it could certainly go too far. I don't know. What are your thoughts as you think not only in the tech and the church, but as this starts moving into we are more and more, tech is more and more in our lives in so many different ways as Christians. And certainly that's good in one sense. We have Bibles on our phones and with infinite number of translations, it seems like. Even I went to a Gideon's thing and they couldn't hand out Bibles in countries, but they could get people to download the app in their language and have it be spoken in their language. Incredible stuff. But we all know tech is also, we're also pretty illiterate biblically, or we're not getting connected in churches and stuff. So anyway, what do you start thinking about not only tech, even though I'm interested to hear in your context, but, going off into everybody in tech?
Yeah, so when I think about tech in this larger picture you're talking about, where we get into talking about, like, the tech in our pockets, the tech in our lives as Christians and how that affects us, it's, like you said, it does some incredible things. Like, if I don't have my Bible with me, but I need a particular scripture reference, and maybe I know a little sub-quote within that scripture, but I can't remember where it's at. Like, I can just pull up my phone, bam, bam, bam. Oh, okay, it's in 1 Corinthians.
Which, pause real fast, I got a confession to make everybody listening. As a pastor, I have a pretty decent grasp on the Bible, but it's infinite amount of times I know the gist of something, and Google has become a very important tool of just putting the gist and finding out the scripture. So shout out to Google.
I just got to say real quick, welcome to my world. This is, as a computer guy, when we don't have the answer to something, we just look it up. Somebody else has the answer.
Yeah, but, don't admit that. Just say, like, you know everything, right?
Oh, it's safe for me to admit everyone in my industry does it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so it's incredible the power that we get. One of the biggest problems I see with the addition of tech to everything in our lives, our relationships, it replaces our books, a lot of our materials, is we lose a lot of the significance associated with those things. For example, if my only access to my Bible is through an app on my phone, it has exactly the same material significance in terms of how I carry it around and how I use it as Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think it kind of blurs the lines between what matters in our lives and what doesn't when we put it all into the same place. I was actually just at a class. I was taking a class through my church just last night, and one of the gals in the class was talking about how she wasn't spending enough quiet time alone with the Lord. And one of the things that really changed that for her, she realized, is I just literally need to take a space, a small corner of a room, put up a meaningful decoration. This is my prayer space. That's all it's ever for. Mm-hmm. And you walk into that space and your whole stance just changes immediately. Mm-hmm. And taking that same sort of tangible thing, so that type of significance is also associated with a personal Bible.
Sure.
You pick it up, you carry it around with you, you open it up, you read from it. It's this thing I carry with me. It's significant enough that I keep it on me most of the time. When I travel, it's with me. I don't bring any other books with me everywhere I travel.
Well, that'd be a little I don't know. I guess it depends on your field, but it'd be a little questionable if you just had a briefcase full of books and you're...
I could just like have a briefcase full of every religious text I can get my hands on.
Well, I wasn't even thinking religious texts. You just got like Dr. Seuss mixed with the Bible, mixed with like Harry Potter and, Your Best Life Now. Just some eclectic mix of...
Could be a challenge of like, what's the strangest reaction you can get from a border security agent?
Oh. Are you just randomly crossing borders? just trying to hop over to Mexico or Canada? I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seems like a very specific situation.
So to kind of jump back into your question, I think a lot of the challenge of technology as Christians is not in what it does for us. It's more a question of what are we allowing it to replace in our lives? And what is the significance of what we're removing to put technology in place of? So kind of the example I made of having a digital Bible versus a physical Bible. And ever since I got used to using the Bible app on my phone, I haven't been as good about carrying my physical Bible with me everywhere. Not as frequent as I usually would, because I know I just pull out my phone and I've got everything I need. And I think it definitely affects us in a lot of other ways. So, for example, ever since COVID started, almost everyone who was part of a church went to online church immediately afterwards, about March, April of last year. And, ever since about early this year, most churches have had at least some limited in-person gathering in this country in America. And, but a lot of churches have seen dramatically reduced attendance.
Sure.
People got used to doing church online. They got used to having, I have all this free time on Sunday now. They just don't want to give that up again, which I can totally relate. I'm a busy person. I get it.
Look at you flexing on the podcast.
Oh yeah, look at my schedule. It's so unhealthy. Don't mirror me.
Just a busy guy. I mean, everybody wants a piece of Elijah. I get it.
I just need to get better. I need to get even better at saying no.
Well, that's fair. Oh, man, I'm preaching to some people. I know that. Come on.
Right. Yeah, so what we've seen is that there's still a lot of people doing online church because of convenience. But unfortunately, and of course it's amazing to be able to, get at least some of that worship experience, to get the access to that teaching remotely. That's really excellent. It's amazing that we ever had that option. And so that's one of those things that technology can do for us, is to give us the ability to even have some semblance of a community while everybody's isolated. That's what an incredible capability.
Absolutely.
But then now, as we're able to start gathering back together again, it's almost performing the opposite function, where access to that technology is actually hindering the reforming of the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that subject specifically, I think it's really important. It's a really big deal. The church at its heart's a community, amongst other things, but certainly it's a community. And I just think the community aspect has been, it's been sacrificed in so many ways and for so many reasons, one of which certainly is tech. Another is this church growth into more of a business model is the wrong sort of thing. But,
is it, though?
Maybe a little closer than I was giving credit for. But look, I have nothing against big churches. I've worked at mega churches and growing churches. I think they have their value, but it's not good when you can come into a place and leave that place over and over again and pretty much never be noticed and never be connected, and no one knows who you are. Because, man, if Christians don't have community, what do we have in a lot of senses? Because the world, certainly the enemy of our souls, even our flesh, it's all against us. So, man, you got to have people in your corner, or I'm struggling, I need to be able to call someone. Or I even had a lady this week who was just in a terrible situation, and I was really promoting to her, look, you got to get involved with Christians. You got to find a community, because she was isolated. And when you're isolated, man, I don't care how good of the teaching or things that you're listening to that might be coming through tech. You're just missing out on something that's absolutely critical. Yeah. And so I think your point that you're making, I know a lot of people who are struggling getting back to church. So that's certainly a downside of tech. It was great, as you mentioned, in the pandemic.
Fantastic.
Well, I saw a great meme that was basically making fun of pastors, specifically maybe older school or at least old school mentality of, and had a picture of a dog kind of growling, and it was like, pastors thinking of Facebook or their attitude towards Facebook before the pandemic, and then it had the same dog smiling. It's like their attitude after the pandemic, because it just kind of forced this whole thing. But yeah, it was great. But I know in my church we've had some significant losses on that, and that's not just all tech. That's some different reasons. But I know a buddy. I mean, he dropped, maybe half or a little less than half of his attendance, like it was before COVID. And it's just crazy how people, you talk to them, they go, well, I'm listening to the sermon from this guy out in Seattle or East Coast or that sort of stuff. And it's like, well, that's good, but that's not church.
Exactly, because church is really, it's the community.
Big part.
Like the community, it's the communion of saints is sort of what everything else is built around. And we have this corporate worship. We have the teaching and the preaching. But as you're saying, like, it all kind of falls apart if you lose that Christian community that it's built on top of.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe you could speak to it with your church, because your church is a little bit younger, probably younger families. That's what a lot of churches go for, and it sounds like yours is hitting it, which is great. But especially with portable, did you guys see a decent drop or a drop off with COVID?
Yeah, we definitely saw a substantial drop with COVID. We went from 2 campuses, 5 total services. And at the larger campus, 2 of the 3 services were pretty much packed full. And even now, having been back in person since March, we are now 1 campus, 2 services, and only the first service gets close to full.
Oh, wow. Have they dove into a bit of why? I mean, I know there's multiple facets, which, this isn't what this episode's about, but are they finding that people are even thinking that got used to staying home, got used to being comfy? It's a lot easier to listen to the service and the worship in your PJs or something like that than get ready and go to church.
So there's a handful of things. This is all pretty much anecdotal, so take it for what you will.
Fair enough.
I know a couple people who they actually just didn't want to wait. So we weren't able to open up until March of this year because we're portable. We rent our spaces, so we couldn't start up again until our landlords were willing to allow groups in their spaces again. And that was until March of this year. So there were a number of people who just weren't willing to wait that long to get back into physical community. So some people in the meantime found new home churches. But definitely a portion of it has been some of what you said.
Yeah.
I've definitely heard cases where there were people who were just like, I just got used to doing church at home. Got used to having that freedom, that free time. And, it feels like they have more of a weekend, which, again, as a person who tries to do too much, I get that. Like that time, it's hard to.
Yeah.
Once you get some time back, you never want to give it up again.
You're not lying. You're not lying there. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of getting back to this line of interesting line, and even back to the service itself. And we're sitting in a great church here as we're recording this, and spend the time explaining where we're at and all that stuff. But it's a great church, and it's a big church, and again, I love what big churches are able to do in many different ways. I struggle on some of the line, and this is me admitting as a pastor, where I'll even take worship in different aspects where, look, having the words up is important. Obviously, I feel like that's having access to the words, a base level sort of thing. But you look at Christian history in a lot of ways where the whole congregation would sing the liturgy, or they would be singing these sort of things. And it's not to say, I've been in a place where it was all a cappella, beautiful, or just a piano. It's beautiful. You could hear everybody and stuff. I'm not saying that's right compared to wrong. And as a matter of fact, if I had a preference, it would be more of the contemporary sort of music. But I wonder sometimes if we lose, again, it becomes production over people, where it's real easy to become a spectator in the whole thing rather than a participant in many ways. It's one thing when everybody's singing and it's evolved and you're part of it. It's another when the music's very loud, the production's going on. And again, nothing wrong with that. That's actually my preference. But I also wonder, because I was even at a church where they joked, they're like, hey, we're going to put the music loud, so you go ahead and sing, and no one's going to hear how bad. Yeah, basically how bad.
That's my deal right there.
Yeah, hey, I'm all about that. But I wonder sometimes if we miss out on just being like we aren't participants. We're just spectators in this whole production. It's theatrical, and again, having done production in a megachurch, a lot goes into the whole thing. And I mean, you could speak to that. But as you're doing tech in it, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? Or even just personally, what are your thoughts? Because you're involved with tech as this is happening.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Like what you talked about there, where sometimes it feels like it's just becoming too much of a production. So my church is definitely more on the very contemporary, pretty heavily produced, especially during the worship experience. I think that's one of our big focuses is we want to have this really nice, polished worship experience. We want to try and do things well, and they're very good. The people who play in the band are incredible. The people who coordinate it are very good at their job. It's just what an amazing team.
Sure.
And it's interesting because there are some weeks where I feel like maybe we've dipped too far into the production, and then we have special events that help me realize, no, I think we're in a pretty good place. So back in August, we did a special event because it's a contemporary thing. So we have,
sure,
typically about a 6-piece band. And back in August, we did a choir day. So we had a 30-something person choir up on stage, and we built the whole worship set around them. And in the worship set, because we had a choir and we knew this would be special, we intentionally, and it's terrible, I don't remember which one, but we actually put a hymn, like a classic hymn, into the worship set. And half the song was done a cappella, and the entire room engaged with it.
Wow.
And it was a really, really special moment where it's just like, put away all the production, all the fancy instruments. Yeah. We're just going to sing.
Yeah. Put away the click in the headset and the backtrack. And by the way, I just realizing as you were talking, I want to make sure it's clear to everybody listening. I am in no way hating on church production. I really am not. I do wish my church was actually more produced in some senses. But it's still the people over, or the production over people thing, I think starts coming into play, because I have been in places where I went, I don't know, I feel like this is a little much. But then again, who am I? If people are connecting in that sort of way, I just don't know the line, and that's why I'm interested in you specifically doing tech right now. Obviously, you love your church and you're good at it, and so this isn't to get you to be like, oh yeah, talk about it. No, but we all, like, whenever I was doing production, I went, yeah, I love this aspect, or this aspect is give or take, and then that's fine. No church is perfect. I just think that, yeah, I'm just interested in, as you see, as the church grows and as you're a part of the back seeing stuff, are you feeling, are you sensing like, yeah, this is resonating in a way that's connecting, which I'm sure it is. Young church, young families growing and stuff. But also it's cool to hear those moments of, yeah, and then sometimes we cut back and the people are just, they're in it in this way.
Just let the people take it over. Yeah, and we definitely lean towards more heavily produced, and like I said, it's kind of a week-to-week thing for me. There are times where I feel like it's a little heavy on the production for my personal taste, but then there are other weeks where I'm like, this feels amazing.
Yeah.
I think what it just means is that what I like kind of fluctuates a little bit from week to week, just depending on where I'm at. But from the tech side of things, I feel like we do a pretty good job of leveraging the technology in a reasonably appropriate way, and not letting it too much become just all tech first all the time. But it is an easy trap to fall into.
Oh, sure.
And it kind of often circles around what we talked about earlier, all things you do to the glory of God, and that drives this culture of excellence. And inherently wanting to do things excellently is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But you always have to ask the question, like, what is the cost to go from good to great?
Yeah.
What is that price, and do you have the ability to pay it? And one of the challenges that we run into from time to time is, we're mostly volunteer labor.
Sure.
And oftentimes the price to do that is time, or maybe it's just even having people be in a place where they can devote more attention to what they're doing. Or, maybe, let's say for the person running slides, and they're never late, but they're often like way too early. So maybe we actually need to have them be taking the time to learn the songs and the pacing of how the slides work with the songs, because the slides don't necessarily always directly follow the progression of the songs.
Yeah.
Like you might have one spot where the chorus on the song ends, and then they play for a little bit, and then the next set of words starts. So there's a pause.
Yeah.
And, the person operating the slides, if they are aware of that, can sit and wait in that pause for a little bit and, let the room have a moment before you tell them, okay, we're going to sing again.
Yeah. Before firing off the next slide.
But to be able to do that, the person running the slides needs to, one, know the music.
Sure.
And then two, they also need, unless they are a person with the talent to be able to do that sort of thing, they need to be taught that skill. Of like, here's that timing. So we want to try and, know the pacing of your slides as it compares to the song, and actually teach them. So like when you have these pauses in the music, these pregnant moments, if you will, let that moment hang for a moment before you move on.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I like the thing about the cost. It's certainly, there's a cost to, there's an opportunity cost to everything, but you were talking about, can you pay the cost? And I think too, do you want to pay the cost? Should you pay the cost of whatever that sort of thing is? And this gets back to, I think, a little bit more generally, because you don't just work at tech in the church; you do tech.
Yeah, tech is my business.
And it is your job. And so you have your finger on tech in general, probably. And I don't know if you have seen some of the stuff, and I'm going to be doing some social media. It's on a podcast. It's on the list.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
It'll be a good one.
It's on the list, and it'll surprise no one. I'm very opinionated about that subject. But as you, whether it be social media or some other thing, what are you seeing with tech that's really getting to Christians beside? Which I agree with you. There is this sense that like having the Bible. Now, confession, when you were talking about having the physical Bible, I do not carry a physical Bible around. I have physical Bibles, not my thing. I have my tech stuff, but I know what you're saying, where it can become very easy to just justify, I've got the Bible on my phone.
Right.
But you never read it. You never go to it. So what good, in essence, is it as compared to maybe it's something better to carry it around, where it's a physical reminder of the reality of God's Word and using it and being able to have that. But what else are you seeing with tech and Christians? Because I mentioned social media. It doesn't have to be that.
But social media, I think, is a great place to branch off to, at least a little bit.
Sure.
Because so social media and the church, there's one particular spot where you would think they're a match made in heaven. Because as the church, outreach and evangelism is a thing we do.
Yeah.
And it takes many different forms and many different churches. But a primary part of it is you need to be able to communicate with people. And, well, where could you reach more people than on social media, right?
That's the truth.
But unfortunately, time has proven that in terms of reaching unreached people, typically social media, not to say that there's nobody who is reached by the Lord through social media, but it is not a story I hear very often.
Yeah.
But despite that, interestingly, more and more we see churches getting increasingly more involved in social media, which is a fascinating thing to me. And I'm personally not really sure where I stand on it. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable, because social media is just, you say, here's this thing, and you blast it out there, and you always, and understandably, if you have to represent, you have to represent so much of yourself with just one post, of course you're going to only put the best.
Yeah.
Obviously. But so good example, recently at my church, we did a special ending to one of our messages where we actually had a singer come on, and they did a song that was a direct follow-on to what was being preached about. And it was a special moment, and it was pretty heavily produced. And they were so excited about having this produced moment. We brought in a bunch of extra camera work and we recorded it, and they wanted to put it up on social media.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how I felt about that, because recording it's all well and good.
Yeah.
But how much did we change this moment we prepared for the people who were in the room? How much did we change that so that we could put it up on social media and make it good for the people who weren't in the room?
Yeah, there was I don't know if you've listened to the podcast, Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, but anyway, it's about Mark Driscoll and Mars Hill, but there was a part where they highlighted specifically, it seemed like something that Pastor Mark Driscoll did was pretty much tailor-made to be broadcast out into this clip for the likes, the hits, and that sort of thing. So it's interesting hearing you say that, sometimes it can be the church about the people there, instead of it being about the people there, maybe can be in a way social media and the other reach in mind, instead of the reach maybe at the actual place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is worth saying, I love my church. I love what they're doing. And I do trust the people that put this on to know that they would never intentionally or knowingly compromise the quality of what they're doing for the sake of social media.
Of course.
But it's kind of the thread of this whole conversation is that technology in the church, it's this very delicate balance. And
Absolutely.
It's very, very easy to find yourself in the wrong place. That those lines are not clear cut.
And to build off of that, and just a quick side note, that's something that I'm real big on is if everybody in your church agrees with 100% of everything you're doing, you probably have a cult and not an actual church. I mean, I'm serious. I've been in so many churches, and I think there's a healthiness of people going, well, I don't know if I agree with everything, but that's beside the point of, is there still unity enough to go, I do trust the leadership, like you just said. Right. We're unified under a vision. And it's okay to have people go, well, that's not my preference, but I'm cool with what this is. A quick story, and this is kind of tech, but it's one of the greatest hearts I've seen on this sort of thing was when I was at the mega church, and 10,000 people, and it was just this whole thing. There was this guy who always sat in the back before you got to stadium seating. Older guy, could barely stand up sort of thing. But he was there, and it was a rock concert, and I think he's got earplugs in, and finally somebody asked him, and they went like, come on, man. What are you doing here? I get this clear. This isn't your thing. He goes, no, it's not. Really, most of this isn't my thing. But he goes, you know what? My kids are here and my grandkids are here, and they love it, and they're connecting with God. And he goes, so what more do I need than that? And I went, what a great attitude on. It's not his thing, but he's like, God's moving here, and he sees the value of it. So I wanted to help you with that. Of course, anything that we say isn't that, like boo church. No, it's the process of, as we're trying to find that fine line of, in this sense, tech, whether it be the formal church or individually, it's maybe not clear at times.
No, it's really not. And there's an interesting thing that a lot of, maybe every church struggles with, is have you crossed over the line into doing things for the sake of doing things?
Sure.
They get focused on what we're doing rather than why we're doing it.
That's good.
And technology is one of the places where you can really see that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, okay, so if we want to do things right in technology, because there's so many moving parts, you need process.
Yeah.
Right? But then you get so focused, okay, we have this process, we've had these problems, how can we improve the process? And at some point along the road, if you're not very careful, you can easily get into, well, this is what we do. Mm-hmm. And you can completely lose track of, okay, why did we start doing this in the first place? And if you forget to ask that question, sometimes you might find yourself making changes that were never worth making based on your original objectives.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I think even across the board, this losing sight of stuff in just tech and getting more to people's personal stuff and outside of formal church context. And I guess this goes back to social media, but it doesn't have to be social media. Social media has certainly benefits, but boy, it's got some major issues. Again, talking to a buddy today, he was talking about, I believe it was TikTok or some social media thing, and just the sense of, man, he maybe felt like he needed to get off of it because it starts, even at a base level, you could just start wasting so much time And it's so easy to click, and then we're not even going to get to the algorithms and what it starts putting forward. Shout out to Facebook with your really bad week. But it starts getting into, tech could be incredible. I love using Twitter to get articles or news about Christianity and stuff. I don't interact in any other way. My feed's all just articles and that sort of news.
Yeah.
But Twitter can also be a cesspool, and Twitter is a cesspool.
At times.
And you could just spend hours going through different topics and stuff. So I even see, personally, with our tech, the phones, we're more connected to so much than ever before, and it seems like less connected to each other than ever before. And I don't know if you, working in the tech field, speak to that or have seen different phenomena with that or anything of that nature.
Yeah, so it's definitely something I've spent time thinking about, and it really, really has been significant in my life. So being a tech person, heck, I started using Zoom for the first time, it would have been like 7 years ago.
Come on, early adopter.
Right. And it's a great tool. It's very good at what it does. But if nothing else, COVID has made it crystal clear that a video conference is absolutely no replacement for just sitting down across from someone. It's not even close.
I mean, some people might say at least some of those useless meetings got cut out, right?
That's for sure.
But no, you're right. Zoom meetings are real quick, funny anecdote. There was this, because court had to go online too, but there's this funny video of this judge and these lawyers, the defense and the prosecution, I forgot which one, but the lawyer accidentally put on the cat face filter, and so he's there, and I mean, this is a formal court, and he's got a cat face on, and he said, "I'm not a cat," and it's just, anyway, continue on. I just found that hilarious.
Yeah, so it's the impact of tech in our lives is it's really significant. In one major way, it affects us as Christians, what you said, where it's a time sink. It's, most forms of online media are designed from the ground up to keep your attention.
Yeah.
Whatever their strategy is for making money, for success as a company, is almost always driven around how much of your time can they get and how regularly can they get it. So a good example, I read a few webcomics, and if I start reading one without subscribing to it in the app, and then I stop reading it, when the next episode of it comes out a week later, it'll be like, "Hey, do you want to come back and read this again?"
Yeah.
So they're really good at keeping our attention, which is not automatically a bad thing, but if we don't really carefully cultivate the discipline to manage how much time we give to our technology, it can just really get out of control. That's one of the other things that can be a problem. So, for example, for a while, I was like way too attached to YouTube. If I had my phone up, I probably opened YouTube to see if there was something interesting on it.
Yeah.
At that point in time, if my primary resource for my Bible had been my phone, every time I go to pull up my Bible, I'm thinking about YouTube, not about the Bible, because that's what I do when I open my phone.
A little Pavlov's dog right there, something like that.
So yeah, I think a lot of the challenges that we will run into as Christians with technology is around boundaries and not maintaining them. Like, technology is an incredibly, incredibly powerful tool. As you mentioned, I work in the industry.
Yeah.
I own 4 functioning computers, 2 desktops and 2 laptops.
Another flex.
And then my work laptop is a 5th computer.
Man, flexing all over the place.
No, some of those are really old. Nobody would want them. But I love technology. Every time I have a good reason to buy a new piece of tech, those are the days I look forward to when I get to go shopping for new technology. It's great. It's so much fun. But it's really, really difficult to maintain those boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's been a challenge in my life, and I can only imagine that it's a big challenge for other people. And social media definitely presents itself as one of the key places where those boundaries get pushed.
Oh, yeah. And quick side note, you love tech, and yet you're still an Android user.
I do like my Android.
We'll all be imperfect. I'm kidding, everybody. A bunch of people just got mad listening. But no, I mean, part of even with tech that amazes me too is just the access to information, which seems incredibly beneficial. I mean, it seems like it's hard to think of downsides of something like that. But yet we're seeing the downside of that. Having so much access to information doesn't necessarily mean all the information is good or valuable or true. And some stuff drives me nuts. But it gets to the point of you almost don't know where to go, how to approach some of these subjects. And again, I mean, going back in history, the library at Alexandria, this amazing thing, and unfortunately burned down, but just getting all this information from around the world, a center of learning, all this sort of stuff. I mean, we have, what's in our pockets right now is more powerful than what it took to land someone on the moon. I mean, the tech that we have is incredible. Yet, who's looking at so much of what we're doing and going like, yeah, everything's going in the right direction. We're certainly progressing on some things. I don't want to say that, but we're more divided, it seems like, than many times, at least in our country's history at different points, and different things. And it comes down to this tech, this access. Even tech has become, it's just even expected in people's lives where, could you imagine I'm thinking of someone's story when I say this, but could you imagine somebody without a phone at this point, or not even getting to a smartphone, but I remember growing up not having phones. Mm-hmm. I remember going to Disney World, where my parents cut me loose in Disney World as a kid, which is crazy to think about now, but packed my pockets full of quarters to hit the payphone to call them at the hotel periodically to check in. This reality of that, but we made it work. Like, you used to just have to have a map or an atlas to get directions. You used to, go to someone's house or have to call them up to hopefully they were there.
Yeah, I remember I want to go visit my friend down the street, so I'd call up their landline and be like, hey, is so-and-so available?
Yeah.
And their parents would be like, oh, yeah, he's fine. You can come on over. And I would walk over.
Or what was I going to say? I don't know how far back you go, but, obviously dial-up internet, and you're trying to download something and someone picks up the phone. Oh, and you just lost your download. Curse that. But
you could never download anything big unless it was overnight.
Even still, my parents ended up getting 2 lines, one specifically for the internet, because we had so much issue with that. But tech is incredible, but we're not seeing, we're just seeing more division, more divisiveness in so many ways, and it's spilling over into the church. It's spilling over with Christians. Yep. I just ranted on an episode about the mark of the beast, and it's like, it's just not the COVID vaccine. And I'm not saying being for or against it. It's just, we need to stop being dumb. We need to just stop believing Joe Blow, who made a video and put it on his page, as if that's truth. Like, it seems like we're more connected, or to information, and yet we're still getting more divisive, and we're still not being convinced of truth and facts, and we're just more dug in on stuff.
And then information used to have to go through a number of, truth checks, if you will, before it could be spread. So, when Joe Blow has his theory about how the vaccine is the mark of the beast, and he tells all of his friends about that.
Yeah.
Only the ones who actually believe him will pass it on to their friends, and so on. Mm-hmm. But when you could just post it online and have access to people who would believe you outside of your own friend circle, suddenly you can go from one person who will spread your message to 10,000 people who will spread your message, and then suddenly it gains traction.
And even building on just tech and social media, and just what it's done. I don't know her last name, Gabby, the girl who unfortunately got murdered with her fiance or boyfriend, van life sort of thing. Anyway, but it's the sense of, you've got these whole people who are influencers. You've got this whole generation of people who want to be these influencers, these kind of live your life, record it, and it's completely fake. It's just completely a show, but it convinces people all these things. I mean, Facebook, and again, I'm going to do something on social media, but it's amazing that Facebook had the information of what Instagram was doing to young girls and teenage girls, and they just sat on it. But it hooks them in, and it's this cycle of, they feel bad about themselves, but that makes them want to get on more, which makes them feel worse about themselves, and it leads to bad things. And it's just this side of tech that I don't know anyone who'd argue tech is bad, in the sense of just in general, in and of itself.
But at its most basic level, tech just takes things that we already do or want to do and just makes more of that.
Sure.
So if you think about it, like, people have been saying X is the mark of the beast ever since Jesus left.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
It's just now in this modern day of the internet and social media, it's much, much easier for somebody to spread that message. So it's a lot more prevalent. You see more of it than you ever have before. The Instagram example is a perfect one. We have been comparing ourselves to other people to try and measure up, again, as long as we've been alive.
Sure.
I mean, look at Cain and Abel.
Fair enough. Yeah.
We've always been doing this, but it's so much more convenient. It can be so much more integrated into our lives. We can compare ourselves to people we will never, ever meet. And perhaps most significantly with tech, unlike people who are physically in our presence, it's very, very easy to filter what we see of each other.
Sure. Absolutely.
So on Instagram, you're only posting all of the great things. So, like you've said, people living a van life where they, travel and show off all the amazing places they get to go and all the cool things they get to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't see all of the, hours of driving in a van cooped up.
Yeah. Or everything that happened before you press play on that perfect video, right?
Right. Or maybe they took 4 takes to get a good video, and the first 3 were disasters.
Man, I'm laughing.
Technology is sort of like a multiplier effect on whatever you point it at. And in its purest form, tech is not inherently good or bad.
Sure.
It just takes whatever we're doing and amplifies it. Now, that said, there's another much deeper topic that actually changes that, and that's where you get things like Facebook's algorithms, where we start tampering with the amplification. Yeah.
We're not going to go down there.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation by itself.
Man, I don't want to start yelling in this place. It's a different topic. But no, I think the distraction thing is a big part of it too. I've been really convicted in my own life about how distracted I am by tech, and what that means and what that's doing. Because back in the day, your entertainment was reading books. Your entertainment was not excluding going do stuff, but at night you would read or you would play some sort of games or that sort of stuff. But now people can watch The Office for the 35th time, and not to cast aspersions on here, but I feel like more people can quote The Office and they can quote Bible verses. And there's this distraction aspect that I know I'm guilty of, but it bothers me I'm trying to read more and different things, but I keep getting distracted by these websites, by this information. And I've had to catch myself and go, is this really valuable? Does it really matter if I know what's happening in this sort of thing? And a lot of times it isn't. But it'd be very valuable if I could get into God's Word and actually know Scripture and put it in my heart, just using that. Or in that sort of stuff. So I don't know, do you struggle with the distraction aspect?
Gosh, yes.
Do you have any safeguards, or are you working on anything that you're doing that might be helpful for other people?
That's really tough. So definitely distractions are a huge thing for me. They're a problem. I work on it. One of the biggest things for me is my phone has been like one of the most dangerous things in terms of distractions, because you have access to everything.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I will do if I'm in the middle of something where I really cannot afford a distraction, I will intentionally make sure that my phone is so far out of reach as to overcome any desire to be distracted.
Yeah, that's good.
So great example. If I'm going to have a really important conversation with somebody, my phone's going to, and if it's important enough that I'm not even going to answer an emergency call, my phone will not be on my person. Because that's like, oh man, technology and distractions.
Yeah.
The way it affects our relationships and like meaningful moments we would spend with each other. Which is perhaps as Christians, especially in community, one of the most important things that we lack in this modern day of surface level connections is we don't culturally in America anyway, we don't spend that quality time with each other anymore.
We don't. Quick side note, it just made me think about you saying that. When I was I was working at the mega church, and part of my job one time was they had this college within the church, blah blah blah. Anyway, I was over a bunch of guys, and I've seen it in so many contexts. This just happened to be one. I went into these guys' apartments, and there was a bunch of guys, some that lived there and some didn't, but all in the program, and they were all sitting in the living room on their phones and on devices. Yep. I went, what is happening here? And so we implemented family time where all this stuff just went away, and it was brutal at first for everybody, but it turned into an incredible time that they ended up running with. I kind of did it jokingly, but it's just amazing that if we can detach ourselves, and how many times have you seen people get together and they're with their friends and they're just on their phones?
Right.
It's crazy.
Yep. And so it's probably the best thing I can suggest is if you find yourself getting distracted, whatever that source of distractions is. So, it's like you work on your computer and you find yourself being distracted too much by YouTube. I can relate to that one. There's plenty of tools you can use to just block YouTube on your computer. And a lot of them you could even say between this hour and this hour, I just can't use whatever it is that distracts you. If it's your phone, physically remove it from your person. It is exceedingly rare that you will get a phone call that you absolutely must answer.
Yeah.
And, if you're worried about that, leave your ringer on when you put it in the other room. And if it rings more than once, then you can go get it.
Shout out to Apple. They have the focus feature now, which they're doing. I think Android might have it, but it probably sucks. I'm just kidding. Everybody's like, Mo, stop it. I enjoy the Apple-Android debate way too much. It's just kind of fun to poke the bear on it. I just like it. I enjoy it.
You're not going to get very far with me. I've considered switching to Apple. So,
oh man, it's not fun when we don't fight. But no, I know that's a big thing, and it's funny with, and I'm sure Android has the same thing. But the reason I brought up the iPhone was Apple had the screen time thing where it lets you know how much time you spend on the screen.
Yep.
There is no more humbling thing than to see your average time on screen. Man. Per week, like per day, and you go, what?
Oh, you've no idea. So I historically I'm a big tech guy, right? So video games, they're super common with tech people, and that is very true for me. And I've just gotten so invested in so many other things, I have very little time for video games. So pretty much I have a couple of friends that I get to see very rarely because most of them are married with kids now.
Yeah.
And so one of the things they can do is they can get away for a couple hours to do some video games. So we'll, jump on voice chat and do that. That's a great time. That's about the only time I spend playing video games anymore. But man, like end of high school, beginning of university, my annual video game hours was 4 digits.
No, I get it. I get it. Luckily, I was right on the brink of a lot of. I mean, I grew up playing the original Nintendo with my dad. I think I was born the year Nintendo came out. Age myself there, but I loved it. I was. This is embarrassing. When I think it was a PlayStation 2 when they first created the modem for the back, and it was an additional thing.
You could get online.
And then one of the NCAA football games was the first one online. I was ranked like top 25 in the world or something just stupid like that when I knew I needed to stop. But no, I get that. The draw of, and there's nothing wrong with it in one sense to be able to just check out for a time. But the problem is the time doesn't, it just doesn't end. It just keeps going so often. And I think a lot of, and I know, I'm like, oh, I don't have time to do this and this. And you go, well, do you? Because look at your screen time on your phone. And it's almost like you worked a part-time to a full-time job every day, averaging per week. And it's like, well, what did you really accomplish in that? And same for me is why I've avoided video games. There's some games I'd pick up and it would be so hard to stop. But I know I can't afford this. And I shouldn't because I will get so distracted, and it's fun. It's great, but
I'll suck you in.
Oh, and what is the value? It's not to say in every instance having an escape, having the fun of that is wrong. Of course not. But also, what's the value of your third run through this show or beating this game for the 8th time or getting these new medals and these sort of things? Nothing to hate, but does that have any lasting value besides the pride?
It's just entertainment value.
Yeah. And
some amount of that is reasonable.
Of course.
But if all of your I'm going to do something fun time is completely non-productive entertainment,
Yeah.
it's probably a good opportunity to reassess like how you want to spend that time.
I remember I was with somebody for a while, and they had a talk with me about football because I loved football. And when football season started, I remember she was having a talk. She's like, okay, well, what's happening here? It's like Thursday is football. Friday usually do something, but Saturday all day is football. Sunday all day is football. Monday night,
football.
Yeah, because you work, and then Monday
Where's
night
the time
was
for not football?
And then she said, and then Tuesday you're playing Madden with your friends. It's like, well, what's happening here? It was just so it's not video. It's not just video games. Tech, even though the shout out to 4K broadcasts of football and stuff. Come on, now we talking here. I got my 65-inch 4K TV to the glory of our Lord and Savior. But I mean, I've had to cut back on football and just constant distraction and sometimes I think it can even be it can keep us from not only improving but maybe even facing the reality of our situations and where we're at different times, because I know of some people who aren't happy where they're at, and so how they medicate's not the word, but how they can get past that is
Medicate might be the right word.
it might be is to just, well, I'll just spend all my time doing this and I don't have to think about it.
Yep. So I can relate to that one. So I come from a family of massive overachievers. And I have two older brothers, both with substantial accomplishments. My oldest brother actually holds, so he was an acrobat, a competitive acrobat. So it's a sport called sports acrobatics, and it's typically either in duos or trios. So you have pairs and trios. And he was in a mixed pair, so he was the bottom half of the pair, and then he had a gal he worked with who was the top. And they're acrobats. He's literally like throwing her up in the air, doing flips, catching her. It's all integrated into a choreographed dance routine. It's some crazy stuff.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff. Like, think Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of stuff they're doing.
Wow.
In fact, a lot of people retire from this and go into Cirque.
What? Why didn't you go into this? That's all I'm saying.
I was too busy with computers.
No, that's fair enough. Fair enough.
So this brother, well, actually, both of my older brothers did this. The oldest one went further, and the peak of his career, he went to an international competition in Brussels and took home a silver medal.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So he was very, very good. Like, this is the type of bar that is in my family for like, are you achieving enough? Which has always been a problem for me because I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so, especially like end of high school, beginning of university, when I was playing a lot of video games, I'm looking at my life and trying to compare to that and saying, well, I'm not doing enough, but I don't want to deal with it. So I go play video games and I get good at the video games and I win. And there's, even though it's false, or I suppose not false, but it doesn't have any real meaning to it. There's a sense of accomplishment in winning.
Yeah.
Do I gain any long-term benefit from it? Typically, no. But there was that sense of success. Like, I've done, for a moment, I feel like I've done something significant.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Man, yeah, I'm right there with you. I just having this conversation, I go, what am I doing? Like, I'm the pastor. I should be better at X, Y, Z, but I'm just not. Again, and I'm looking at my phone. I have thought multiple times about getting rid of my phone. There's this, I don't even know if they have it. I still think they do. It was like this jelly phone, I think was the name of it. Basically, it was like the world's smallest smartphone. I figured I could just
get one that's almost useless.
Oh, pretty much. Like, I could do what I needed to, but it was so small that it just wasn't worth doing the other stuff. And I had it for a while, and it was good in one sense, but I just, man, the struggle of trying to figure it out. And I think that's a good place to kind of start to bring it to a head, at least landed as I think is. It's still that line. It's still that interesting line. And I don't even know what this is going to mean for the future with tech, because tech's just constantly increasing. And it's constantly making our lives easier in a lot of ways. This isn't even getting, and maybe we have to continue the conversation, but then you start getting into AI.
AI and tech gets closer and closer to us every day.
It
started with, computers the size of rooms, then computers in the office, then computers in your home, then portable computers. Now it's smartphones. Well, then smartphones. Now it's smart watches. Like our tech is going to become more and more integrated into our lives. So it's really critical that we just continue to think about where are those lines between where it's helping me and where it's hurting me.
Yeah.
And training yourself to be able to recognize those and take action.
Yeah, because it's just, I don't feel like it's going to get any easier. And kids are coming up with it now, and just being inundated from the start in tech and social media, and without the right boundaries, without the right discipline, I just don't know how we go forward in so many ways without just succumbing to the distractions and knowing all of the new TikTok trends, but none of the old doctrinal statements or none of the old important things that make us Christians and that sort of stuff. Not to get too heavy at the end there, but it really does, for me, come down to, man, I love tech. I'm with you. I'm a big tech guy. I have my iPad in front of me with the M1 chip. Shout out to Apple, but come on, get the software up to date here. There's more that can happen here. I've got tech everywhere, and I love it so much, but I go, as my 65-inch TV is hooked up to a Roku, an Apple TV, a Fire TV, it's hooked up to all these things that I go, what am I doing here? What is the point? What is the end game of this sort of stuff? Where is the lasting value? Where do we go? So I think you're right on that line and the importance of it. So do you have any kind of, not final thoughts, but maybe final thoughts, but things that you feel like are important with this conversation or anything like that?
I don't know. I think the biggest thing is what I kind of already said, just that it's really, really important to identify, one, the ways that technology is helping you so that you can leverage that. But then also to figure out, okay, where might it be hurting me?
Sure.
And, for the sake of this conversation, like, where, as a Christian, where is technology hurting me in my walk? And what's great is that technology might even be able to help you solve some of those problems you can identify. But I think that's probably where I would put my final stance, is that it's just really big to focus on where is it helping me, where is it hurting me, what can I do to kind of remedy those problems.
And even real fast on the church, circling back to that, being a tech guy in the church, I think you brought up some good things on. There's a lot of great ways to leverage technology in the church.
For sure.
And spread different things, whether it be the gospel or different aspects and stuff. But I feel like if it becomes, and I kind of liked on some of the things you said, like, technology is a good tool, but if it becomes the end in and of itself, or it becomes this goal, or the goal, speaking particularly of production, because we both have histories in that, where that becomes over people or something, that's where I think we just miss it, right? I think that's just kind of the same sort of thing as knowing the lines and the boundaries and setting that up with technology in our lives.
Yep, for sure.
And in the church. So I feel like that's a good place, at least for now. And Elijah, we'll have to talk about this again, maybe in a different way, but I enjoyed.
Fun. Maybe we'll get into AI next time.
Oh, man, because now you're talking about, now you could go all kinds of ways with AI.
A long conversation about our robot overlords.
What does that mean for the future of people's work? But even more than that, what happens if we create artificial intelligence and,
more of a when than an if.
Well, I mean, you're right, but I was talking about more of the consciousness of AI and what that means. Anyway, we have no plans of doing that, everybody. We're just spitballing at the end. But, man, thank you for the time. Thank you for jumping on here, the first conversation of hopefully many on all kinds of different topics, because, just listening to you, it's tough to be on the podcast because everyone's going to be like, that dude's voice is so much better than Bo's, and you can't even see him, everybody. That's part of why this is audio only. So shout out to Elijah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. But thank you, Elijah. Thank you for everybody. However you're listening, I appreciate it. But, man, before I go, as always, 3515. Have a good one.